In today's video, we're going to once again play with the NHL Draft Lottery Simulator. We're going to run the simulator, see how the draft lottery would work out, and we're going to do a mock draft for the top 10 picks. We'll jump into that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're going to be playing around with the Tankathon.com Draft Lottery Simulator. Now, we've done this a couple times before. It's a really fun exercise to do to see where teams might end up picking. And of course, depending on where they end up in the draft lottery will determine what player they get in the mock draft. For the mock draft purposes, we're just going by player rankings for right now, as I mentioned in previous videos. We're not going by what I think makes the most sense for each team. We'll get into that more detailed and have some more differently structured mock draft videos once the draft lottery is officially completed and we know 100% certain where each team is going to be selecting. But for today, I've conducted another simulation, and then we're going to put up here the top 10 picks, starting at 10, work our way up to 1, and see how the draft ended up working out this time around. The number 10 pick ended up belonging to the New Jersey Devils, and this is the pick that they ended up acquiring from the Arizona Coyotes in the Taylor Hall trade. And with this pick, they would select a 10th rated prospect right now, which is Russian goalie YAROSLAV ASKAROV. Now, as I mentioned, he's a top goaltender in this draft. He draws some comparison to Lightning goalie Andrei Vasilevsky. There's certainly a few teams in the top 10 that would not mind grabbing this guy and making him one of their top prospects. He's a really solid goalie who many believe have the talent to be like a franchise type of goaltender who they can build around for the future. Clearly, he's a top prospect, is going to go in the top 10, and right now in this draft, we have him going to the Devils, who could certainly benefit from having him right now, considering where their goaltending depth is in the organization. The number 9 pick belongs to the Chicago Blackhawks, and they're selecting Finnish center iceman Anton Lundell, who's a very well-rounded player with great vision, great puck handler and passing skills, can play in all situations. He's a player that some might have ranked a little bit higher. He certainly dealt with some injuries this year, and some of the other prospects that are ranked ahead of him and just had a little bit more of a solid season, I think, overall. But Lundell would certainly be a great addition to pretty much all of these teams. I think the Blackhawks would do very well. I think he'd be a good fit. I think Lundell would be a pretty good fit here with the Blackhawks organization, and they would be selecting him here with the 9th overall selection. Now, next up, we have the number 8 pick, which goes to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, if you watched this series before, you've seen in the last draft lottery simulation we did, Montreal was very lucky and won the draft lottery, picking 1st overall. Of course, they were not so lucky in this round of the simulation, and this time they'll be selecting Marco Rossi from the Ottawa 67s. He's a smaller player, 5'9", but he certainly has tons of offensive output. He was born in Austria, has been playing his junior hockey here in Canada. He's got 107 points in 51 games played. Extremely smart player, gifted playmaker, but he can also finish as well. He's been a steady riser on the draft rankings this year. He's a player who earlier in the year was certainly ranked much lower, but with his strong play this year has certainly worked his way up the rankings. The number 7 pick belongs again to the New Jersey Devils. Of course, this is their own selection that they have, and they would be selecting Canadian-born forward Cole Perfetti, who's playing for Saginaw in the Ontario Hockey League. Now, Cole Perfetti is a very talented hockey player. He's really smart. He's a goal-scoring type of center. He's got a wicked shot. He's a really smart, creative, offensive type of forward. Some scouts say he needs to work on being a little bit more explosive with his skating, but that's certainly something he can work on here as time goes on. But he's a very talented offensive player, and where New Jersey is with their organization and their rebuild, he would be a tremendous pickup for the Devils. Next up, 6th overall, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and they would be selecting Swedish forward Alexander HOLTZ. Now, of course, the Ducks would be falling one spot based on their how the NHL standings are as of today when I record this video. So clearly, somebody in the lower part of the top 10 here has won the lottery and moved up a number of spots. Alexander HOLTZ is a true goal scorer, got an impressive shot, smart player, great vision, and certainly if he does have a weakness, it would be that his skating's not quite as good as some of the players ranked ahead of him here, but really he doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. He'd be a tremendous pickup for any of these teams, especially the Ducks, who are, again, going through a bit of a rebuild here. Next up at 5 overall, we have the San Jose Sharks pick, which belongs to the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators would use this pick to select the top defenseman in the draft, Jamie Drysdale. He's an elite skater, having a tremendous season in the Ontario Hockey League. He's a power play quarterback, a very, very gifted skater, really took the stage at the World Juniors and shone brightly as one of the top defensemen for Team Canada, even though he started with a smaller role due to the fact that he was a draft-eligible player, a little younger than most of the D on the team. He certainly grabbed the attention and proved that he could contribute in a big way. Drysdale is certainly expected to be a top-pair defenseman, at least at this stage, when he makes it to the NHL. Next up, we have the 4th overall selection going to the Los Angeles Kings. So that shows that they've fallen a little bit here in the draft lottery. And of course, the Kings have been on a winning streak of winning 6 consecutive games, which has impacted their overall position here in the standings and pushed them down here a little bit. Now, the Kings with the 4th overall selection would select Swedish forward Lucas Raymond, who's a very well-rounded, highly skilled player. He plays the wing. He's got exceptional hockey sense. He's got great speed, terrific hands, pretty strong defensively as well, and is very, very tough to play against. He's a tenacious player, and many of his opponents find him one of the tougher players to play against over in Sweden right now. So he, again, would be a great addition to pretty much any of these teams, but the Kings grabbing Raymond at number 4 would be a tremendous pickup. The number 3 pick belongs to the Buffalo Sabres, who was very lucky here. They grab one of the top 3 spots and move up 3 spots here based on the NHL standings as of today. They would have been picking 6 overall had we been basing this just on the standings. The Buffalo Sabres with the 3rd overall pick would take German player Tim Stutzle, who's been another steady riser in the draft rankings this year, along with a guy like Rossi. Those 2 guys have really moved up a lot this year. Stutzle's proven to be a pretty solid all-around player. He's got great speed and quickness. He's a natural center, but often plays the wing. He's an extremely skilled offensive player. He really stood out as being a top player for the Germans at the World Juniors. And as I mentioned here, just having a really solid overall season with lots of development. He's really turning into being more of an elite player out of this group of draft-eligible players. Next up, at number 2 overall, that pick belongs to the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa Senators would then select the number 2 ranked prospect, Quinton Byfield, a big center iceman from the Ontario Hockey League, a 6'4" center with power forward type skills, an extremely talented offensive player. Got a great mix of speed, skill, and strength, something that doesn't come along very often. He's been the number 2 rated prospect for quite some time. At one point early in the year, some thought if he could rival for number 1, but clearly number 2 I think is where he's been sitting most of the time and is probably where he's likely to go. He's going to be a huge difference maker for any team and projects to be a top-line center that teams can build around for their future. The 1st overall pick, as you probably figured out by now, belongs to the Detroit Red Wings, who are dead last in the NHL, have the best odds of winning, and in today's draft lottery simulation, they were fortunate enough to draft Alexis Lafreniere with the 1st overall selection. There's no doubt Lafreniere will be going 1st overall. He's a high-impact forward who can control and dominate games, completely take over. He's really smart. He's got great hands. He can play a physical style of game as well, even though he's not a huge guy. And he's put up tons of points in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And there's absolutely no doubt he will be a game-changing, franchise-changing player for whoever is fortunate enough to actually end up drafting this guy. Clearly, the Red Wings, even though they technically have the best odds being in last place in the NHL, technically the Ottawa Senators do have a better odds if you take the odds for where theirs are in the standings as well as the Sharks. You put the 2 together, it actually gives them a greater, higher percentage to make the number 1 overall selection than the last place Detroit Red Wings. So that's today's draft lottery simulation. I will probably do this again another 1 or 2 times before the actual draft lottery, which as of right now is tentatively supposed to take place April the 9th. It's usually early into the 1st round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, where they'll have that broadcast during the intermission of one of the NHL playoff games. So, of course, let me know your thoughts on the draft lottery process. If you have any questions about how any of it works, make sure you leave some comments and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Otherwise, let me know which prospects you're most excited about and which ones you're hoping your team gets an opportunity to draft this coming summer. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.